Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar comic review. This is going to be my full spoiler review for Smoke and Shadow Part 2. The book is out today, Wednesday, December 16th in comic book stores. If you have it pre-ordered on Amazon, they probably won't be shipping it out until either December 29th or just like a day or two before then to get it to you for December 29th, which is the mass market release date for the book. But if you want the book now, go to your local comic book store. That's where I got mine. And with these video spoiler reviews, I always make sure to have the physical copy of the book because I just like to make it kind of clear that even though for the last few comics, I've got a review copy, that you can actually get the book on the day of release, and I still buy it, of course. So yeah. Final thing I'll mention before I start is just that this isn't the only content I have out to cover the release of this book. Linked in the description are my full spoiler written review on the site avatarthelastairbender.online.com, which I suppose is basically going to cover roughly some of the same things I'm going to say in this video, but obviously this video is going to be more freeform, whereas the written review is more focused. And then I suppose most in-depth of all would be the Avatar Online podcast review of the book that we did. It's a 3-hour, 15-minute review, basically, of the book. The four of us, myself and my other co-host, on the recording, basically read through the book, page by page, analysing it, discussing it, theorising a little bit, and there's even some speculation at the end. It's a really in-depth review. It was really fun to record, even though it was a long recording. But I doubt you're going to find another review of this book out there as in-depth as that review, so check that one out if you want the full kind of details. And if you don't have the opportunity to get the book just yet, that's actually a good way to probably just experience the book, because we do read through it. If you want to get the flow of how the story actually comes out, that's the best way to do it. Final thing I'll say is just the reason I haven't had videos on Monday or Tuesday is because I've been sick the last few days. I still am. So excuse me if during this video I kind of cough and potentially sneeze, runny nose, that sort of thing throughout the video. I'm trying to limit my videos this week to just the important ones. Mainly this review, and then probably Star Wars The Force Awakens review. There we go. Let's get into the review. I'm probably going to keep it a little bit shorter than usual just because of the whole sore throat situation here. But let's start at the very end. So final spoiler warning here: if you don't want to get spoiled in the book, please leave now, read the book, and then come back and watch this. This is going to be more of my kind of thoughts on the book rather than like, it's good, go buy it, because I've already said that in my non-spoiler review. So yeah, the book is really good, and I think the most interesting thing about the book is that the early parts of it read completely differently. There's so much more depth to the early parts of this book once you get the two big reveals that happen in this book at the end. Those two reveals, that Ukano is in on the whole Kamurakage plot, the whole kidnapping thing, he's completely in on it. So while it was a threat used against him in part 1 with Tom Tom, he now is completely aware of this and like actively goes to visit the kids in the kind of location they're being kept in. Let me just find the page. Like, it's just in the middle of the comic. You earlier on in the comic, you see like these moments where he's just like talking to Constable Sung, and he's just like, you should keep an eye on your child, and you're kind of like, that's a bit creepy to say, is he in on it? And then just randomly they cut away from like Zuko and co, and all of a sudden let me get to the page here, and all of a sudden Ukano just walks into the room where all the kidnapped children are being held, and he's just like, Tom, it'll be fine. It'll be, just a few more days until everything's done. So like, that's a big reveal. Like, Ukano, kind of full on villain, because like in part 1 you felt some sympathy towards him because it really came across like he was being like fully manipulated by the Kamurakage, though you still felt that he was somewhat villainous because the new Ozai society was his own thing. Like, he basically sacrificed the relationship with his family because of he believed in his organization. He wanted Ozai on the throne more than he cared about his family. But in this, finding out that he was actually kind of in on the kidnapping of his own child was like, Wow, that is harsh. And given the fact that he's like manipulating May the whole time, trying to turn her against Zuko, he's manipulating Constable Sung, the new character in this book, the investigator, and he's just trying to do everything he can to turn the whole Fire Nation against Zuko. It's you really see his manipulative side, and we don't get the full details on like who the mastermind behind the whole plan is, because the other reveal is that the main Kimura Kage is Azula. That's the cliffhanger reveal at the very end. As you can see here, we don't get the her unmasked, but just the lightning, the fact that Zuko says it's Azula, it's pretty obvious. We know she's going to be in part 3. This is the reveal. Azula is the Kimura Kage. You're kind of like, she must be in charge to some extent, but given her mental situation, I don't know if she could come up with a plan as complex as this to defame Zuko. So I'm kind of in the perspective of like, Azula is kind of supplying the power, the skills, the ability, and Ukano is probably planning this, is kind of my way I'm seeing this. But again, I'm just speculating on that. We don't get the full nature of what the relationship is, who's in charge, and stuff like that. But yeah, so the only thing you really get on that is just that they constantly refer to the fact that Ukano is afraid every time he's in contact with the Kimura Kage. That his voice he kind of shakes, his voice trembles when he talks to them. He's afraid of Azula. We're not really clear if he knows it's Azula or if he honestly thinks that they're spirits himself. But we do get the reveal earlier on in the book that these Kimura Kage here aren't actually real ones, because the book actually reveals to us the story of what the real Kimura Kages are and how they link into the history of the Fire Nation. I'll get into that later on in the review. But yeah, Ukano, like the plan he comes up with in this book is really well done. Like, it makes him seem like very kind of smart, just what he does. Effectively, what it comes down to is that the kidnapping of Tom Tom is causing panic among people. Ukano comes into a meeting between Zuko, Constable Sung, and others, and they're like, okay, Zuko, what you need to do is you need to set a curfew, create a task force, and investigate this. Aang kind of bumps in and says, like, no, that'll just cause panic. We can't do that. We need to just investigate this first, till we know what we're dealing with, then act. Zuko agrees with Aang over Ukano, but then as the constable leads Ukano out, he begins to kind of manipulate the constable onto his side, saying that, like, do you have a son? You'd want to keep an eye out for him. What if something happens to him? And he's kind of saying, like, if I was in charge, if they did what I did, that wouldn't happen. And what happens next? Constable Sung's child is kidnapped by the Kimura Kage. And suddenly Sung begins to agree with Ukano. He goes against Zuko and installs the curfew and stuff like that. And then what does Ukano do? He transforms the New Ozai Society into a new organization called the Safe Nation Society, and basically engineers this situation where a woman's child is about to be kidnapped by the Kimura Kage, but the Safe Nation Society stopped this kidnap attempt from happening. The Kimura Kage get away, but they've saved the child, and it makes them look amazing. All the while, Zuko is off investigating the history of the Kimura Kage. He, Aang, May, and Kalo go into the Dragonbone catacombs to investigate the early history of that. And while he's away, obviously all this is happening. When Zuko comes out, it makes it seem like he hasn't done anything to protect his nation, while Ukano has this whole organization ready to go, and it's just this really clever plan to make Zuko look like a kind of inept leader, when in fact he's actually investigating and finding out the real kind of villain behind the whole thing. So it's really interestingly done. Now, I do think the Azula reveal at the end marks a kind of shift in the story, in that I think they definitely hadn't planned for this. I don't know if the Kiyi was a planned kidnap attempt, but now that they've kind of caught Azula and they're kind of surrounding her, I think it's marked the shift where basically the Kimura Kage threat, I think, is for the most part over. The focus now is Azula is not in the best mental state. She's very dangerous. How do we deal with her being around here? Because we know the kids are safe, but our heroes don't know where their location is. So, they're obviously going to have to find that. There's going to be some resolution with Ukano, but I think for the most part, part 3 is going to focus on just resolving things with Azula. which is really interesting. So yeah, like that's most of the stuff covered there. With that, before I get into the history and that sort of thing, May and Zuko sort of thing, um, Ursa, she was a really interesting part of part one with what they set up with her. Unfortunately, in part two, it's my one kind of major negative with the book. They don't really advance the kind of plot with Ursa and Kiyi all that much. It's kind of just more of the same. Ursa is being protective of Kiyi. Every time she touches Kiyi, Kiyi kind of goes back and says, "No, you're freezing. Your hands are cold." And obviously, what they're going for here is that Kiyi isn't aware that her mother is afraid, but her sensing Ursa's coldness is kind of the way she's sensing the fear. Ursa is cold because she's afraid being in the palace, being in the place where she had that horrible marriage all that time. Um, and Key kind of can't really get past the fact that her mother has a new face. She's now cold, and she doesn't yet realize how afraid her mother is and stuff like that. So there's still resolution to come there. It's just like I felt they could have done a little bit more here. The key thing that happens, of course, is that Key is kidnapped. They manage to get kind of stall Azula and get her into a confrontation. But the other two Kamurakage, who we don't get revealed who they are, though I doubt there's anyone really important, they get away with Key, it seems like, though we don't know if they're pursued. That's obviously to be resolved in part 3. But yeah, Key is kidnapped. Ursa isn't aware that it happens. So we don't really know how she's going to come into contact with Azula, how she's going to kind of get Key back, or what her involvement in part 3 is going to be. But I assume she has to be involved with Azula's focus and stuff like that. So yeah, let's get into the Fire Nation history that we get. So this is interesting because one, we get the history itself, which is great, but we also get the character interactions between our kind of main group in the book, that being Aang, Zuko, Mai, and Kalo. And it's really interesting because obviously Mai is there with her current boyfriend Kalo and her ex-boyfriend Zuko. Instantly an awkward situation. And then Aang is just the kind of person there looking on, kind of not wanting to get involved in these kind of squabbles between the kind of couples. And mainly what it is like Kalo compliments Mai. Mai, instead of just accepting the compliment, says something to Kalo, though what she says is more aimed at Zuko. Like he says, "You're really cute when you're pessimistic," and she's like, "I know, I've been told," like completely looking at Zuko ahead, which is the whole, Mai saying that she hates the color of the sunset or something like that, and like Zuko says something very similar to "You're cute when you're pessimistic," and I love it when you're negative, that sort of thing. And it's just this really kind of thing, like, even though Mai is dating Kalo, nearly all of her interactions with Kalo are kind of like in some way to kind of make a snappy comment towards Zuko. And later on in the book, she kind of realizes that her brother's been kidnapped, and she's kind of focusing more of her attention almost on kind of pointing out to Zuko that, like, you broke my heart. She's kind of focusing more on her relationship than she is on her brother. And there's a really telling point later on in the book. Let me just show you it. It's a page with no dialogue, and it's just it's Mai basically going to herself saying that, like, for now I'm focusing on getting my brother back, and kind of then I'll get to the romance stuff. And you can see it's this page right here. You see she takes out the picture. She doesn't like rip it up or anything. She just puts the picture away for now. But the look on her face definitely says that she still has feelings for Zuko, but she's going to focus more on her brother for now. And that's a really nice thing, just because it's kind of like, yeah, Mai, that makes sense. And like you kind of see like some of her feelings for Tom Tom like properly come out, and even Zuko makes some comments about Tom Tom. Like there's a reference to the fact that in the past they had this, Mai and Zuko went on a date, but their mother left Tom Tom with them, and Zuko thought he was just going to be really annoying, interrupting their date. But he actually just was really liked watching how happy Tom Tom was with all the simple things. Like he chased after this moth one time, and he's just like, I've never seen a kid so happy in my life. Yeah, and just there's other things like that. There's a lot of reference to kind of like past dates that they've had. Like even though Mai's dating Kalo, she seems to be more focused on kind of making comments at Zuko. It leads up to this moment where Mai and Zuko are left alone. And what happens basically here is that Zuko out of nowhere just says, "I miss you, Mai." And Mai kind of like snaps. She's just like, "Why would you say that at this point?" And through the scene, you get basically Mai's feelings on her relationships with both guys. She basically says that, I actually find the line because it's actually one of the best lines in the book, I think. Where is it? Okay, here we go. Kalo likes me a lot, probably more than I like him, and that's exactly how I need it to be, because I won't ever let myself get hurt like that again. And she's referencing the breakups that she's had with Zuko. So it's this thing where she's basically just saying, like, this is what I need right now. I need someone who kind of likes me more than I like them. Though she's making it kind of clear here that Zuko is one of the only people who she will kind of open herself up enough to even allow to get hurt. She's usually a character who you don't get a lot of emotion out of. So, a character who can get deep enough kind of into who she is to hurt her is someone she does really care about. And it's a very telling scene, and like I definitely think this is going to be the canon ship, like, because there's scenes that show the Kalo Mai relationship, and they're fine and all, but this book is making it very clear that the feelings are still there between Mai and Zuko. And even though that reunion doesn't happen here, I think it has to happen in part 3. The only problem is I don't know how they're going to break up Kalo and Mai in a way that doesn't make Mai look kind of horrible, like she's used Kalo, or they do something like they have Kalo turn out to be using Mai the whole time and he's still working for Ukano. And I think that's going to be a debate with this book, and that, like, are we reading too much into it that we're suspicious of Kalo, or are we meant to just accept that he's a fairly nice guy? Because apart from like a couple of lines here or there, he is really a cool character in this book. As they're going through the catacombs, he's helping to figure out some of the puzzles down there. He seems to know all this stuff. He sticks up for Zuko at one point when he has to kind of suspend Constable Sung for going against his orders. He just sticks up that, like, no, he's the Fire Lord, he needs to do that. When Mai got really annoyed at that decision. And stuff like that. So the thing that keeps the romance from being like annoying and awkward is that Kalo and Zuko don't fight over Mai. There's no antagonism between the two of them. It's just like little moments where Zuko looks at like a cute moment between Kalo and Mai. Then Kalo looks at a moment between Zuko and Mai. And it's just like, oh, like they just look at it and they don't say anything to each other. There may be a talk between the two of them in part 3, but right now they're not hinting at any, like, I hate you for looking at my girlfriend or anything like that. So yeah, let's get into the history again. They go to the Dragonbone Catacombs to investigate the Kamurokage. We've been here before. This is where Zuko found out the history of Sozin and Roku. Now, it's here we find out some of this stuff about the Fire Nation history. What we've known up to now is that the Fire Nation write the history books themselves. They make themselves seem like the good guys, that all the other nations attacked them first, they just defended themselves, and they're trying to help the other nations become more powerful and stuff like that. Makes sense. Here we get the full details. Sozin has actually sealed off the history of the Fire Nation at anything before him. So basically, as far as anyone was aware, the earliest history of the Fire Nation starts with Sozin. That's all that's out there. That's how much in control the Fire Lords are of the history. And it's behind this locked door. They eventually get through, and here's where you get the history. You get the history of the early Fire Lords, the early Fire Islands, as they used to be called, the warlords that ruled them, and how the first Fire Lord came to be, and how the Kamurokage had a hand in that. Basically, what you get is that the main warlord at the time was a man named Toz, or Toz, T-O-Z, who's a warlord here. Let's see. It says, long ago, before the Fire Nation came into existence, warlords ruled the Fire Islands. They fought one another for territory, and often the common people were caught in the middle. All the warlords were cruel and ruthless, but worst of them all was Taz. Feast or famine, Taz demanded annual tributes from all villages in his territory. One year, a village dared to refuse Taz his tribute, and so to teach them a lesson, Taz had all the village's children kidnapped. The children were never seen again, and the village's mothers died in sadness. So that's the kind of story you're getting the hint that, oh, in the past, one of the key things that happened was that Taz kidnapped children from other territories that dared to defy him. And like, what did the Kage do? What's the legend? That they take away children who are bold. But it continues. Soon after the mothers' deaths, dark spirits began to haunt Toz and his men. Every so often, they would drift into the warlord's encampment in the middle of the night. The next morning, a child would be gone. So there's what the Kage are doing. They are basically taking revenge for like Toz going too far, making his conquest and power be more about stealing children. So they kind of did that to him. Out of fear, Toz's men abandoned him and his regime collapsed. And then later on, we get to meet the actual Kage. One of them comes out and speaks to Aang and basically says that we haunted the Fire Island until eventually someone rose up, the first Fire Lord, and united all of the islands into one nation, the Fire Nation, and ushered in a new era of peace. So the first Fire Lord was actually a kind of Avatar-like character almost, that brought peace to these warring islands of the Fire Nation. And so you sort of understand why Sozin wanted to seal off this history, because he would come across as one of these warlords rather than what the Fire Lords originally were. But we get more. We get the whole idea that the Kage then, after this point, left the human world. They say to Aang, between now and then, first Fire Lord, we've never come back into the human world. And so this is the kind of point where everyone's like, the Kage that are kidnapping kids right now, they're not actual spirits. They're humans. And that's when that reveal comes out. And then later on, the Azula reveal completely confirms everything. So that's how it ends up working. Now, a theory I have is that it's a very vague thing about the death of the mothers here, of the children. I'm finding some sort of a connection between the fact that the mothers died in sadness, and then soon after, the dark spirits, the Kage, began to haunt Taz and his men. It's later revealed by the actual real Kage that all of the Kage are women. She says, me and my sisters. So I'm thinking that somehow, whatever way these mothers died, they somehow either became spirits or already existing spirits, the Kage, have some relation to helping mothers or protecting children, and they stepped in to kind of haunt Taz and his men. I think there's some sort of a connection there. Like, it seems way too convenient that mothers died of sadness, and then almost immediately afterwards, Taz was haunted like for revenge. We know humans can become spirits. The Painted Lady, Iroh, and Yue even. So we know there's a few different ways that you can actually become a spirit. So to me, there's something there, and I think they may reveal that in part 3. But yeah, really cool history. They don't really they don't really attempt to tie it into beginnings all that much, though none of the illustrations of the past show any bending. So it still fits in with the whole idea of Wan and I suppose his friend Jaya, who, when they leave the Lion Turtle, it seems like that's the formation of the Fire Nation. It could very well be the case that at some point that group finds their way to the Fire Islands and introduce Fire Nation into the Fire Nation. Firebending into the Fire Nation. So, it doesn't do anything to directly connect to beginnings, but it also doesn't do anything to kind of say this can't be at the same time as beginnings. Because all we really get here is that warlords were then, warlords on Fire Island. The Fire Islands then became the Fire Nation thanks to the first Fire Lord. And then there's no real mention about bending and stuff like that. So they could fit together. As for when it takes place, the haunting of the Kage, I think, has to take place before Wan closes the spirit portal. Because I really don't think that spirits start to come back into the human world until a good bit after Wan's initial sealing of the portal. So I think some of this takes place pre-Avatar, and then potentially some of it afterwards takes place post. But it's probably pre-Avatar, just based on what it is. So technically this would be some of the earliest Avatar history we've ever gotten. So there's that. Anything else to really discuss? You know, we get a little bit of Suki, a little bit of Ty Lee, but not that much. I mentioned in my non-spoiler review that there is the return of a ATLA character, a kind of minor one that people were pretty happy about. Who that is? It's Fire Sage Shayu returns now with the title of Great Sage Shayu, and he's in charge. And basically, they just come to him and they're like, "Could you please open up the catacombs for us? We need to go in there and check." And there's just a kind of funny scene between Aang, Zuko, and Shayu. So that's that. My throat is starting to go, so I'll basically end the review there. It's a really good book. The political stuff actually works out really well. Ukano becomes much more of a villain, and he becomes much more interesting as a character. Mai, I think, as a character is developed really well in this book. Her relationship with Zuko, they do some nice stuff with, but they also make a good effort to shift things from being romance focused to being more focused on, I want to get my brother back. Cliffhanger is really cool. Azula comes back into things, and she's gonna completely change the way the series is going forward. Everything's gonna focus on that now, and just in general, like, I'm so excited for part 3. I think it's got a lot of work to do because there's so much going on. Like, all the stuff with Azula needs to be resolved. Ursa, Ukano, the whole Kimura Kage stuff needs to be resolved. Potentially set up the next series even more. Mai and her father need a resolution for sure. They have to find all the kids again. But like, there's a lot to do in part 3. I think they can do it because the shift is going to be more towards, okay, let's deal with Azula, rather than like, because most of the plot's over now. They know that the Kimura Kage aren't spirits. They know Azula's in charge. I think they're very quickly going to find out the connection to Ukano that we as the audience know, and it's all going to come out. So I really like the book. If you read the book already, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on it, but or just your thoughts on any of the reveals I kind of mentioned here if you haven't heard them before. So that's been the video. Once again, in the description is a link to my full spoiler written review, as well as the really in-depth podcast review, which you should definitely check out if you want a lot of analysis and more details on some of the theories I kind of put out to you guys here. So they're both linked in the description. So thanks for watching this video, and bye.